I am very excited about this talk. And one of the real perks of being on this board is seeing all these talks and meeting all these wonderful people. And just to make this really quick, because I know it's after 10 o'clock at night right now in Chile, which is where Stefan is located. He's an Aussie based in Chile, based on his profile on Instagram, has 68,000 Instagram followers. That's amazing, but not really when you see the Instagram account because the photos are just beautiful. He's also a tour guide, a speaker, an author, a beautiful photographer, and I know we're going to see a lot of your beautiful photography tonight, Stefan. And on top of seeing a travelogue of Stefan's travels throughout South America and Central America, we will also be hearing from him some suggestions of what might work in Southern California gardens. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Stefan.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol, and thanks to the SoCal Horticultural Society for having me. So I'm going to be taking you through Latin America. It's sort of a whirlwind trip of some of my favorite countries that I've traveled to. So it's just a little snapshot of many different Latin American countries. So yeah, as Carol said, I'm Australian, of course. You can tell by my accent. I love the Australian animals, of course, which we're famous for, but also the Australian plants. But my real passion is actually in cacti and succulents. It has been from a very young age. From around age 9 or 10, I started to get into them, and I joined up with a local cactus and succulent society in Australia. And I was always interested and fascinated about where they came from. And I noticed when I was younger that they were not native in our Australian landscape, which drew me to South America primarily, where my favorite species come from. I'm really into big columnar cacti, so South America is really great for that. Southern Mexico too also has a lot. And I have a family over here in Chile. Well, this is my son when he was 5 years old, next to a big clump of Copiapoa, but he's just recently turned 7. So he's a little bit bigger than the Copiapoa now, but I try to take him out into habitat as much as I can here. And I do work as a tour guide here in South America. You can check me out at cactusexplorer.com. And if you have any questions at all, give me an email at cactusexplorertours@gmail.com. Even questions related to the talk tonight, or cactus questions in general. And yes, the genus is Perodia now, for that Perodia magnifica from Brazil. So the countries I'll be talking about in this presentation are Mexico, Venezuela, and Colombia, Peru and Bolivia, and Chile and Argentina. So Mexico, I'm talking about just by itself, but Venezuela, Colombia, I kind of combined together, as well as Peru, Bolivia, and Chile and Argentina. And you'll see why there's some similarities in some of the plants and obviously the geography too. So starting with Mexico, the one closest to you guys up there in the US. Well, Mexico, even though South America is my favorite country for continent for cacti, Mexico has the highest diversity of cactus species in the world in terms of a country. So there's almost 700 species of cacti which are native to Mexico, but there's around 520 species which are endemics. That's species that you only find within the country, because quite a lot share the border with the US and also Central America and the Caribbean too. And Mexico's got a really diverse climate, actually, and geologically as well, and geographically, it's unbelievable. It's just full of mountains everywhere you go. I'm sure some of you have probably been there or seen talks about Mexico, but it's just full of mountains and rocks, and cacti love that. And they love finding little niche, interesting microclimates in these mountains. So there's lots of endemism in cacti in general. They like to find little niches in the environment. So I'm going to start by talking about sort of like the central part of Baja California, which will be most similar to you guys, and all the plants in that should grow in Southern California too. And then I'll be taking you across into the Sierra Madre Oriental, which begins in around Coahuila, Nuevo Leon, and goes all the way down south into Puebla and Oaxaca. and it crosses a lot of different climate zones too, anywhere from hot desert to semi-arid desert to humid subtropical. So in Baja California, one of the most keystone cactus species there is Pachycereus pringlei. It's the tallest cactus species in the world. The picture on the right, I've actually climbed up inside the branches of the cactus there. You can see me. So just an incredible species, really great for landscape gardening, but it does grow into a bit of a monster, as you can see. And it's got these beautiful diurnal flowers, these nice white flowers. Interesting crested form on the right. This is pretty common in a lot of different cactus species where you can get like this kind of freak mutation, apparently caused by a virus, which causes it sort of this monstrous cresting type growth. Ferrocactus gracilis. This is a really attractive cactus species with beautiful kind of like crimson spines and crimson to red colored flowers. Really, really beautiful, great for landscape gardening. And it can also have really thick central spines sometimes, like the one on the left there. So not all of them have that really thick spine, but that's what we look for when we go to habitat, is kind of really unique, special species. And they're the kind of ones you want to collect seeds from and try and cultivate at home. They can get pretty tall as well, but it takes a long time, decades. This is an interesting xerophytic, I'd call it like a caudiciform type succulent, this Ficaria columnaris, commonly known as the boojum tree. Really, really unusual and forms pretty big populations in certain parts of Baja California and should grow well in Southern California climate. This is a pretty common shrub-like columnar cactus, Lophocereus scottii. A lot of you might be familiar with the totem pole cactus, which is a monstrous form of this species. And there's a couple locations in Baja California where we actually found this monstrous form of Lophocereus in habitat. So it is actually something that comes from habitat, and it's not a cultivar or anything like that. So any of these weird types of cacti that you find, they often originate from habitat, not from cultivars. So it's always fun to go out and try and find those populations. And you walk around, you can find all these kind of weird, different monstrous forms, as you can see here. So that's one of the highlights for me about going into habitat and finding these kind of really weird and unusual forms of cacti. And they generally clone themselves, these kind of weird freak forms. So this piece is broken off down this seasonal river and rooted itself into the ground. So what we noticed was a lot of these monstrous plants were growing along this dry riverbed. So they were just pieces that were breaking off and kind of cloning themselves along the ground, which I thought was really interesting. This one is commonly known as the creeping devil cactus, Stenocereus aruca. This is really popular in cultivation and one of my favorite cacti from Baja. And it also, because it's this decumbent growth, it actually sends down adventitious roots into the ground and also clones itself along the sand dunes there in Baja California. So you can see it kind of creeping and crawling across the landscape. Really, really fascinating cactus. Now we're going to jump across into some of the hot deserts from Coahuila around Torreon and Saltillo, and then go across into Nuevo Leon into the Sierra Madre Oriental. So I'll be moving fairly quickly through this Mexico section of the talk. So a lot of you will be familiar with the Chihuahuan Desert, which you share with Mexico. So really famous place to go and visit. This is Big Bend National Park. In southern Texas, which I went to a couple of years ago now for the first time in Texas. Amazing place. And the state of Coahuila in Mexico has one of the highest diversity of cactus species in the country. 230 species are native to this state. So an unbelievable quantity of cactus. And you see the Day of the Dead skull there, which they were promoting when I was there. And on the side of it, they actually had this little note about how many cactus species were in their state. So they're very proud and they're very conscious of the cactus species they've got in their country and in their state. One of my favorites from the area is Pherocactus pilosus. So it has these nice white trichomes coming out of the areoles. So where it gets the species name pilosus from, kind of like these hairs coming out of the areole, and beautiful red spines, making it really, really attractive for landscape gardening. And when it flowers, they come out in this beautiful ring of flowers from the crown there, as you can see, really puts on a really, really spectacular show. And here's a really big Pherocactus pilosus, um, which would be really, really old. They rarely get this old in cultivation. So it's really, really spectacular to come across such an old and majestic plant in habitat. And some of them even collapse under their own weight. So you can see that this one here is some of the shoots have actually collapsed down this rolling hill. So really, really heavy. Just imagine the weight behind some of these plants. This small little barrel cactus is the kind of cactus Horizontalonius, which is shared with Texas. Beautiful pink flower, really, really nice thick ribs and spines on this species too. It's really widespread through Mexico. It only kind of just creeps into the southern US, but you can find this almost all the way down to Mexico City. And also a kind of serious desert canthus. You can also see this in Texas. Another keystone species of the Chihuahuan Desert. You can also find this almost all the way down to Mexico City as well. Different populations have different colored flowers, really big, beautiful flowers on it. Really amazing species. This should do pretty well outside too in Southern California. Echinocactus platyacanthus. This is quite a common species all the way through the Sierra Madre Oriental. You can find it at many different locations. It can change its form a little bit. I mean, when it's younger, like the plant on the left, it looks very different than a big mature plant on the right there. And they're usually like the ones on the left, forming this kind of big globular sort of barrel, but sometimes they can get really, really elongated in certain populations, like the one on the right, and form almost a columnar cactus. The guy on this property with this big kind of cactus said this one was about 450 years old because they're actually measuring the growth rate of them so they can get an idea from the height how old they are. So really long-lived cactus. This big cluster's down near Puebla, in the state of Puebla, near the city of Tehuacan. So sometimes they can form these big clumps and clusters. This was all the same plant. So yeah, there's some interesting kind of variation in the species when you go to different habitats. Great habitat full of yuccas, also Bocarnea, the ponytail palm, different columnar cactus, agaves. Amazing habitat. A land turtle, just to mix it up a little bit. This is pretty common to see in the desert areas of Mexico. Pretty fun thing to come across in the desert too. Now into the Sierra Madre Oriental, Yucca carnarosa is one of the keystone species. You can see it in a lot of different situations. Here it is growing in gypsum soil. And with gypsum soil comes a lot of interesting gypsum endemics. This area's got palm trees through it. It's got cypress trees, cacti, a really weird and interesting exotic mix of plants growing in this area around the city of Monterey, south of Monterey, and really highly endangered and rare cacti, and really, really endemic to the niches. They grow on these canyon walls on the gypsum soil. This is Aztekium hintoni and G. Hintonia mexicana. They're two of the rarest cacti in the trade, really slow growing. Not something that you put out in your garden. There's something that's more inclined to grow in a pot. And here it is growing with Selaginella gypsophylla on these canyon walls. So luckily enough, I was there just after a rain where these Selaginella, they're called the resurrection plant, they open up. So you got to be there at the right time to see them open and fully photosynthesizing, really showing off. So beautiful species. This is the Aztekium hintoni up on the gypsum canyon walls. They only grow on the vertical walls. As soon as it flattens out, these special cacti disappear. They're growing there with also some ferns. There's orchids, some hectares. And here it is kind of looking out. I had to kind of climb up in a bit of a precarious position here. But you can see how there's this interesting mix of cypress trees as well as kind of forest in this gypsum soil too. And here, this is really interesting how you can see the gypsum is so pure, it's crystallized here. So it's kind of like this really enchanting habitat to visit. But it's also really interesting to think about how these cacti are adapted to really toxic levels of calcium and sulfur, which is in really, really high and toxic concentrations in this gypsum substrate. So really, really beautiful when these cacti are growing in this kind of white, almost ice-like substrate. And in a slightly different area, this is Aztecium ritteri. So it's growing on these canyon walls here, as you can see on the right, where we did this trekking down this really remote canyon in the Sierra Madre, and we found a lot of these really beautiful Aztecium species growing on the walls. And an interesting study looked at the inside of these cacti, a lot of different cacti that grow on calcium-rich soils, and found that they actually form calcium oxalate crystals just underneath their epidermis, located in the hypodermis of the tissue. So a lot of cacti do this to, they can't actually secrete excess of toxic minerals, but they can actually store them in vacuoles and other specialized crystallized iodoblast cells within the skin of the cactus. So I just thought that was really interesting and something to point out. Cool adaptation about how they've evolved to tolerate toxic levels of minerals in soils. Now we're going to go down to the area of San Luis Potosi and work our way down around kind of like the area of Mexico City and down into Puebla. So there's a little town called El Peyote. I'm not actually going to show you any peyote because this is not something that is encouraged to grow because in the US especially, it's classed as a Schedule 1 drug. But around this little pueblo, you can find a lot of these really beautiful cacti, the peyote, which I'm sure you've heard of. And around this area, you've got some beautiful yuccas, really old Yucca australis. Pherocactus pilosus is still here in the area. And also Daisy Lerion, which is a beautiful genus that you can find a lot of in the Chihuahuan Desert, a lot of different species. Looks like the Australian grass tree, the Xanthorrhoeas. Really, really slow-growing plant. Really beautiful. This is a cool star cactus, Astrophyta myriostigma, really common from around the city of San Luis Potosi. And Pherocactus glaucescens grows a lot in the Sierra Madre Oriental too. Beautiful glaucous kind of almost turquoise blue color to this cactus with beautiful yellow spines, incredible contrast, really great for landscape gardens, relatively hardy as well. And Echinocactus grusonii, of course, the golden barrel cactus. This is really common in cultivation, but really, really endangered in habitat, surprisingly. It's really rare to come across this species. It has some pretty serious conservation issues in Mexico. And here it is growing with some pretty nice agaves, if you like spines and thorny things. And interestingly, the Echinocactus grusonii, it forms kind of columns when it gets older in habitat, but in cultivation, it tends to clump and cluster a lot more. So it's growing pretty much on the canyon walls or on vertical cliff walls in the area, kind of close to Mexico City. Here's a couple different species in the genus Mammillaria, showing you the diversity of kind of branching characteristics and stem characteristics. Some are more columnar, some are more spherical. Here on the left, we've got Coryphantha erecta, really beautiful golden colored spines, and then Mammillaria probella there on the right, forming a clump with beautiful white colored spines. So it's really cool to sometimes play around in your cactus collection and landscaping to have this nice contrast of like gold, white colored spines. Something that I try and do in my gardens or pot arrangements at home. Oh yeah, here's a really beautiful big clump of Mammillaria Parkinsonii. Also growing with some nice Hectea species, beautiful frosted colored leaves. Here we've got Astrophytum ornatum. This is also a pretty hardy cactus out in rock gardens and should do well outside in California too. It can get quite elongated with age. A really popular Astrophytum in the trade. Yeah, down in the state of Puebla, you start to get a lot more columnar cacti in Mexico. Up further north in the hotter, dry deserts, you don't get many columnar cacti, but down where it gets a little bit more subtropical, more rainfall, you get these columnar cacti forests. This is Neoboxbaumia mescalensis. It's actually been moved into the genus Cephalocereus now. So as we were talking before about the changes in taxonomy, cacti, the cactus family is going through a lot, has gone through a lot. And continues to do so. But beautiful columnar cactus, a really nice shape to it. Doesn't get so wide, so you can fit this into kind of a tight space in the garden too. Here's another species of Neoboxbaumia polylophus, I think it is, growing with Ferrocactus glossescens on limestone rock. And here's a big cluster of Ferrocactus robustus, also from around Puebla City. Really love how they form these big clumps and clusters. A lot of cacti species do actually form kind of smaller clumps and clusters, but not so big like this. And I've actually got a comparison photo coming up. It's got a nice yellow-orange flower. Here's a comparison photo with Ferrocactus robustus on the top and then Copiapolis solaris from Chile on the bottom, which has very similar branching characteristics. And there's not too many places in the world where you can see such big examples of these species, which can be, many feet across. So something really cool about visiting habitat is seeing these really old and ancient plants. Here we've got Cephalocereus columna trahani, and it forms this lateral cephalium down the side of its stem where its flowers come from. So this is the reproductive part of the plant. It doesn't send out flowers from any other part. So this is just dedicated here to the reproductive function of the plant. So really interesting columnar cactus from Puebla, Oaxaca border. And of course, the ponytail palm. This is Bocanea gracilius, fantastic plant, really, really ancient cortex forming plants in cultivation and habitat. These habitat ones would be super old. I love this habitat. A lot of different cactus species there with just really unusual exotic plants. The area around Puebla, and especially around Tehuacan, is just really amazing to go trekking and explore. All these really cool agaves too, like this agave stricta. This is beautiful in cultivation and in landscape gardening too. Also a very hardy species. And when it gets stressed, you can see, different pigments coming out in the leaves. When you get down to Oaxaca, it's just full of tillandsias. This is actually, on the Oaxaca-Puebla border, Tillandsia tehuacana. Beautiful tillandsia, also growing up in the Bocaneas. It also has what you call adventitious roots, where it just hangs onto the sides of rocks or trees or cacti as well, as in this example. So really cool to see that up close. Really xeric tillandsia. This is a different, another different tillandsia with beautiful stressed colors, which it gets just before it flowers. Now we're going to really get down into the humid subtropical parts of Oaxaca to see some unusual cacti that grow there as we say goodbye to Mexico and head on down to South America. So the city of Oaxaca is amazing, very touristic, highly recommended if you ever go there. Probably some of you have been there. Really great culture and food. And it is, like I say, kind of humid subtropical. Oaxaca City's up kind of in elevation. When you go down into lower parts of Oaxaca, especially where it borders with Chiapas, you get humid subtropical forests, but you still have xeric niches in these forests, just like this beautiful limestone outcrop here, full of agaves, xeric tillandsias, cacti. even members of the Euphorbiaceae. There's beautiful tillandsias everywhere, especially this Tillandsia concolor, appropriately named. And then you've got other different types of Cephalocereus, nice mammillaries, as you can see. This mammillaria is growing in the limestone rocks here, beautiful white trichomes on it. Really just exotic plants everywhere you look in these types of habitats. Plumeria was growing here too, genus Plumeria, Tillandsia growing on it, just this amazing combination of exotic plants. Tillandsia caput medusae also growing on the side of a rock. Someone mentioned the term lithophytic before. This is a lithophytic. Tillandsia growing on the limestone rock. Just beautiful natural xeric succulent gardens. Also, this really weird agave, nizandensis, looks kind of like an aloe. This is a really, really unusual agave, just endemic to this area, pretty much only to that main limestone outcrop I showed you. Big pseudobombax, big caudiciform type tree there with a Demia testudo. This is what you call epiphytic cactus growing up in the trees. It does grow on the rocks too, so it's also kind of lithophytic, but it grows a lot in trees and on trees. Also got the adventitious roots here hanging onto the side of the tree trunk. And you get big forests of this Pachycereus weberi, a beautiful columnar cactus from Oaxaca. Really nice color to its stem. It's kind of got this this bluish kind of gray stem to it. Really stunning and nice in cultivation too, but does get quite big. This is a really rare succulent in habitat, Echeveria or Echeveria laui. Popular in cultivation, common in cultivation, but really, really rare and endangered in habitat in Mexico. So only from a couple of canyons. In Oaxaca, just grows right up on the top, on the rim. And there's nurseries in Mexico which are reproducing it and selling it, which is really great to see. So we went and visited that. I do tours down in Oaxaca in Mexico as well. I've been there several times with groups, and people love to go and see these conservation type nurseries they've got there, where they're selling these plants, which also helps to limit the pressure on poaching from habitat. And there's some other interesting echeverias in this area of Oaxaca too. Quicaticana and Echeveria canti as well are also native to this area. Okay, so now we're going to jump down into South America, and I'll take you through the Caribbean. Well, I'm going to take you actually through the Andean section of Venezuela and Colombia, which is what I focused on when I was in those two countries. Venezuela and Colombia flag. So the Andes Mountains begin or end in Venezuela up here in the Merida Mountains, which you can see here, and it goes all the way across to Caracas, and it comes down through Colombia, through Bogota. Bogota's nestled quite high elevation up in the Andes, which I didn't realize years ago, but it's a beautiful city. And the Andes actually splits into 3 different cordilleras when you get into Colombia, but remains as one single cordillera all the way down through Ecuador into Peru and Bolivia, where we'll go to later. But an area which is not commonly visited by cactus enthusiasts, but there are some really amazing species there. It's full of Asteraceae too, the Espalacias, Senencio, really, really nice spot for Asteraceae observation as well. High elevation. This is actually at about 15,000 feet. So really quite high up in the tropical Andes. Really beautiful Echeveria species, multicolored. This is endemic to the Merida Mountains, around the city of Merida itself. Beautiful Echeveria. Kind of almost looked a bit Dudley-alike, the one on the left there, and some other populations too, but rarely documented species in habitat. I haven't seen it in cultivation either. Down around the city of Merida, there are just these kind of rain shadow valleys. So a lot of it was really tropical in certain parts, especially from the border from Colombia going into Merida. But then all of a sudden it just turned really xeric, and you had these kind of forests of cacti that appeared, which was just amazing to see. Really, really spectacular landscapes, and kind of a surprising, semi-arid landscape in such a humid subtropical country. There's also agave species which make its way down into Mexico and Colombia too. Here's a beautiful agave flower in bloom. I was there in the dry season. As you can see, all the grasses are dry, but it does get really quite green here and get sort of kind of monsoonal type rains in this habitat. This is a beautiful Pilosocereus species. This is really common in cultivation. It only grows, but in this small area, in this kind of small rain shadow area around the city of Merida. So it's got pretty small habitat distribution. Beautiful golden colored spines with the turquoise stem. Now we're going to jump down across into Colombia. And I started at the border here with Cucuta and Bogota. So I crossed from the border from Colombia into Venezuela. It was a bit of a dive. Traveling in Venezuela was pretty difficult, but Colombia was a lot easier. So I focused on this main section here between Cucuta and Bogota. So also I was seeking out these kind of semi-arid landscapes in a tropical environment where cacti always made an appearance. Pilosocereus species, Pracereus, Cactaceae. The Pracereus and the Cactaceae, interestingly, have nocturnal flowers. Pilosocereus has diurnal flowers, but wasn't there in the flowering season. But beautiful blue stems in this Pilosocereus on the Colombia-Venezuela border. And these tree-like cacti can still kind of compete against other trees and shrubs, which a lot of other smaller cacti cannot. So these taller cacti can still get up there above the canopy and get some sunlight. Colombia was just full of all kinds of different exotic flowers. I could give a whole presentation on the different stuff I saw there. The orchids, the fuchsias, the passion flowers, bromeliaceae. It was just amazing. But here's just a quick glimpse of some of the cool stuff I saw in flower when I was there. I was really interested in the higher altitude habitats, especially with Puya species. I love bromeliaceae and also Espalacia species as well, or the frailejones, as the locals call them. Lots of different species up in the paramos, they call them, in the higher elevation wetlands or the moorlands of the Andes. Really interesting species. This is another Espalacia species near, they're in the Asteraceae family, these Espalacias, around Bogota. So I thought it was a palm tree from a distance, and I got closer to it, and there's these Espalacia urbe, and these beautiful frosted leaves. There's a lot of trichomes on the leaves, but really, really exotic, unusual plant. This is a nice population of Espalacia pescana at 12,000 feet in the Andes. They form usually really big, thick populations. And they're also quite long-lived plants. So the ones that are about 2 meters tall behind me are around about 150 years old approximately. Now I'm going to take you down into Peru and Bolivia for a quick spin around the Andes down there. Peru and Bolivia flag mixed together. So a lot of these countries kind of share borders and share some culture, which is why I kind of grouped them together. Especially happens in Peru and Bolivia and Colombia and Venezuela. So the Andes here are known as, the land of the Incas. So there's a lot of, when you go trekking in the Andes, there's a lot of Incan ruins that you can find. And of course, there's a lot of plants that go along with that. So you can kind of get that, that history and that botanizing done at the same time. So I've been to Peru 5 times, and there's just some amazing places to get out into nature there. As I said, I really love bromeliads, so especially tillandsias. So I'm always going hunting for tillandsias in the Andes. Lots of amazing diversity, and also cacti too. And it's kind of cloud forest habitats at pretty high elevation, but it's still It's still in tropical air, so you get an interesting diversity. This is Browningia hertlingiana. This is really common in cultivation. I've seen this in California. It's kind of like blue torch cactus, I guess is a common name, but that can be used for the Pilosa cereus that we saw as well. So, and this has also got the Tillandsia growing on it too. Along the coast and up in the mountains, you get this interesting Neo-Raimondia arachipensis. There's only 2 species in this genus, so it's just a biotypic genus of columnar cactus, which I think is really interesting. Growing on the really dry, this is actually still technically Atacama Desert here in the southern part of Peru. And you get Browningia candelaris, or the candelabra cactus. So beautiful species, one of my favorites, not common in cultivation, might be difficult. One of those difficult columnar cacti, but still just marvelous. I mean, yeah, really impressive to see in habitat. It starts off as just one singular column, and then when it gets about, I don't know, 80 years old, it starts to send out some branches, really, really slow growing. This is a Loxanthocereus species, probably hummingbird pollinated. A lot of cacti with these types of flowers are typically hummingbird pollinated, but not always. I mean, you get some insects going in there as well, so they're not sort of 100% dedicated to hummingbird pollination. But this is interesting, growing on the sand dunes. Higher up in the mountains, again, you got Espostoa, beautiful genus. That's the one with the white spines, but it's growing with the Hagioserius pseudomelanostelli here with the yellow spines, the golden spines. So beautiful contrast. 2 really great cacti that do well outside in the garden in Southern California too. Beautiful contrast between the spines. I always look for that when I'm doing landscaping. Yeah, stunning color to the spines on this species. Oh, here we've got a little Melocactus peruvianus. This is a pretty diverse genus through the Caribbean areas, but you get some quite a lot actually going down into Brazil as well. But yeah, they form this cephalium. So this is another, we're talking about cephaliums before. This is the reproductive part where it fruits and flowers from. And you can get really quite tall cephaliums on older plants. Beautiful color to the body of this species too. These are a little bit more sensitive, so they're more suited to pots in greenhouses. Now we're into Bolivia. So there's kind of like this, yeah, pretty seamless transition in the Andes. It goes from Peru into Bolivia. A lot of the same kind of species share this habitat. I went there with a couple of botanists from Washington State about 3 years ago now, and we spent 1 month going through Bolivia. Just amazing country. Full of lots of different kind of ecosystems as well, really diverse in its plants and animals too. So these are just a few photos from our field trip. We did a lot of camping, spent a lot of time really in the wilderness. We try and get out as far as we can, always trying to find a new species or something. Really trying to explore. And here we are. Oh, they were doing some textile kind of work with llama wool and alpaca wool too, up in the Andes. Lobivia is a really common genus. It's actually an acronym of the country Bolivia, so they made it Lobivia, and really diverse genus with a lot of different species all through Bolivia, but also in Argentina and Chile and Peru as well. And a lot of them are pretty cryptic unless they're flowering. They're kind of hidden in amongst dry grasses and shrubs. So you can see that flower coming out there. This is just all the same species, but a lot of diversity in the flower color. This is really a common theme through all the different species in the genus Lobivia, really diverse in flower colors and even morphology a little bit too. Another nice columnar cactus, great for landscaping, Trichocereus bertramianus. Really love these kind of tall, hairy. Well, they're not hairy. The spines actually, you see how the spines change from when they're smaller on a younger plant. They're kind of thicker, a bit more defensive, maybe to protect against herbivory. But when they get older and this taller part of the column, the spines change quite a lot and they become more dense. And there's a lot of really heavy UV radiation up here on the Altiplano and the Andes. And so these thick spines also help to protect the epidermis of the cactus from sunburn and to also protect the DNA from UV damage. So spines are not just a defense against animals, but also from the sun. Nice flowers. Here's a tiny little cactus that was hidden in the crevice. This used to be in the genus Rebudia. That's gone through a lot of different taxonomic changes. Common theme as well. This is in the genus Alostera or Aoraceae. And you can see it's really small. There's my fingers next to it. So it's hidden in this rocky crevice here. A lot of cacti are really cryptic, hidden in the landscape. You got to keep a keen eye out for the flowers, or just have a bit of an idea about the different niches in which they grow. Oh, here's another nice Labivia pentlandii, beautiful pinky colored flowers. These are really hardy cacti. This is growing 4,000 meters above 13,000 feet in the Andes, so it's going to tolerate almost anything you throw at it. One thing they might not like is if it gets too hot, because, you know, with the higher elevation tends to keep the temperatures a bit cooler, but yeah, it forms a nice big clump, and when it flowers, it can be a really, you know, really spectacular display. And of course, the Salada Uyuni, have to mention, the biggest salt flat in the world. And in the middle of it, there's this island which is covered in Trichocereus atacamensis, or now Leucostelli or Echinopsis, whatever. But beautiful columnar cactus on the middle of the salt flat in Bolivia. And so when I'm talking about cool temperatures, cold temperatures, I mean, this habitat plummets below freezing every night, even in summer usually. And so cacti, which are full of water, they have antifreeze proteins, which are called like cryptoprotectants. And so it's kind of like antifreeze in your radio, which stops this water from freezing, stops the intracellular cellular water from freezing. Because if it freezes, it essentially just dies, you know. So I was looking into really cold habitats for cacti, and the two coldest ones are actually in, or one's in North America, and North Dakota, where it gets down to -60 Fahrenheit, and you've got Escobaria vivipara growing there. And in South America, the coldest cactus habitat I could find was -27 Fahrenheit down in Patagonia with Pterocactus hicknii. So just something interesting to think about, how cacti evolved to really cold habitats too, not just hot deserts. Also in Bolivia, Cactus straussii. This is really common in the trade, but not so common in habitat. It's always growing on cliffs in Bolivia. So the term for this is cremnophilic, which is a plant which is dedicated to growing on cliff faces or canyon walls. So this is what it looks like in habitat. Another Alostera species, beautiful flower. These are really prolific flowering cacti, so great to have in your collection. They flower many, many times during the spring and summer. So highly recommend species like this. Oh yeah, we've got Oreocereus salsianus, got the beautiful white trichomes coming out of its stem, really common through the Andes. You can get some varieties with kind of orange or red colored spines as well. Hummingbird pollinated flower too, also insects. Another Labivia cinnabarina. This has beautiful flowers. Hardy cactus. This would grow almost anywhere outside in a rock garden. Also kind of geophytic, pulling down underground, got a big taproot. Now a quick look at the sort of tropical savanna climate down the other side of the Andes, almost getting into the Amazon here. This is in Bolivia still. This used to be a philodendron, but now they've changed the taxonomy too. There's that ridiculous name up there if you want to write it down or take a screenshot. But yeah, really common house plant or common genus. A lot of people love philodendrons, but yeah, this is in the forest in Bolivia. Tree ferns. This looks like the Dicksonia species from southern Victoria, where I'm from in Australia, but it's a different genus, Cyathea. This is a picture I took with the drone, so you can see the tree fern here in the forest canopy. Lots of orchids all through this area, really, really diverse. We saw many, many species of orchids. Lots of other kind of epiphytes, lithophytes growing in the tree canopies, tillandsias, epiphytic cacti, ripsalis, Even begonias. This is Begonia boliviana, very hardy begonia, growing on the side of a rock. Phyphora is another genus of epiphytic cactus, because you can see these branches are just covered with different epiphytes. Ferns as well, really diverse. Interesting Ripsalis species we couldn't identify, but these are the, really quite delicate little flowers that's got on it. Another strange Phyphora. It probably shouldn't even be in the genus Phyphora. It might be in a different one now, but they had it in Phyphora here. But this is growing up in the tree canopy too in Bolivia. So cacti can be very diverse in the types of habitats that they colonize. This is a really weird Trichocereus arboricola, which also only grows up in the tree canopies. So bizarre when you think about the Trichocereus I showed you before, growing as like a big columnar cactus on the salt flat there in Bolivia, to think about this growing in the tropical rainforest almost. Deuteroconia is really common all through the Andes, especially in Argentina and Bolivia and Peru. Beautiful bromeliad, it's really striking colors. Kind of a menace in the garden, to be honest. You can get hooked up on these, but they're so beautiful. And when they flower, spectacular too. Bromeliaceae, this is really common all through Bolivia. Saw it in so many different places, all over the place. Really spectacular when it flowers, really gets that nice flush. Oh, this is pretty common in cultivation, Cactus winteri, but very, very rare in habitat, growing on this cliff face, also in the forest with some, this is another Parodia down here, Parodia, Tillandsia. So here you can see the contrast. They're growing kind of on this dry cliff wall, but there's just this, semi-deciduous forest all behind it. Really difficult to get up there and get these pictures. Cactus winteri. This is subspecies Colodimono, a monkey-tailed cactus. Critically endangered in Bolivia. We didn't get to the habitat. We know where it is, but they sell it on the side of the road here in Bolivia. Really common to see. This is a picture I got from a friend. Should have referenced him here. But this is what it looks like in habitat, growing on cliff faces too, with big Tillandsia species. Batrachania guntheri. This is a really weird columnar cactus. Some lump it in the genus Espostoa too, but genetic data shows that, molecular data shows that it is actually in a monospecific genus. Really, really bizarre columnar cactus. It would be really interesting to have this out in your garden. This does grow in the Huntington Botanical Gardens, so adapted to California climate too. Oh, and a big tarantula to make sure you're paying attention. Really beautiful if you're into arachnids. Okay, now I'm going to take you down to Chile and Argentina to finish off the talk. Let me know if I'm going incredibly over time here. You can feel free to cut me off at any time if you want to. But we'll start with Chile, then finish with Argentina. Chile and Argentina again, next to each other, neighbors in South America. In the high elevations, you've got this really weird Oreocereus hempelianus, kind of a small globular Oreocereus, hummingbird pollinated flower too. And something that really gets people's attention in the Chilean Andes is this Azorella compacta. It's in the Apiaceae family, so it's related to carrots and parsnips and things like that. And it forms a really nice resin on it too. It smells incredible. And people in Chile make tea out of it. It's actually prohibited to do that now because it's so slow growing. It grows about 1 millimeter per year. Nothing, what's that? I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch. So big plants that many feet across can be thousands of years old. So really, really slow growing. So harvesting it for any kind of other use is really detrimental to its conservation. And it can grow all the way up to 17,000 feet. This picture is taken at 14,000 feet. So it gets really dry up there. It has a big taproot underground as well, so it's able to store water. because it is kind of like a desert environment up there, high elevations like that. Oh, more Oriocereus. Yep, they're all through the Andes, also in Chile. This is the Atacama Salt Flat. Really amazing salt flat near San Pedro de Atacama in Chile. Great spot for seeing wildlife. You can get flamingos in these lagoons that form on the salt flat. And vicunias. This is one of the native South American camelids that you can see up in the Andes. Really, really beautiful, incredible nature. Darwin's rhea looks like an ostrich. This is Serencia formosa, beautiful cactus, incredible flowers. This grows in Southern California. I have a friend actually near San Diego who grows this out in his garden. Really hardy species. Now, I was talking about the Andes. Now I'm going to take you down to the Atacama Desert on the coast of Chile, where you can get this spectacular flowering desert phenomenon. Not every year, about once every 4 or 5 years, or maybe once even every 7 years, this phenomenon occurs in the Atacama. And this is where I focus most of my attention in South America and where I chose to live. So I'm fascinated with the Atacama Desert and its flora. That's where I do a lot of tours. Every year I do tours in the Atacama. After a rain, beautiful floral displays, just amazing. Really, really breathtaking. And of course, the cacti are my favorite, as always. And I'm really focused on the genus Copiapoa right now, also Iriaceae. So here's a few Copiapoa species growing in amongst some of the other flora. This is actually a woody euphorbia shrub. This is in the Bignoniaceae. This is Argylia radiata. Some really interesting species growing in the Atacama Desert. Well, this is not the true desert. This is sort of just on the edge of it, on the fog desert on the coast. Beautiful Copiapoa species, other native wildflowers. This is Iriaceae rata, beautiful golden barrel type cactus, endemic to Chile. Copiapoa dilbata, forming huge clumps. Oh, Copiapoa gigantea. This is in a really arid part of the coastal range. Copiapoa grandiflora. Copiapoa longisteminea. Notice how white it is. It forms this really thick coating of farina on the epidermis. This helps to protect it from UV radiation. Also helps it protect it from insect herbivory. Copiapoas just love growing on rocks, and that contrast is just amazing. And these really special little Iriaceae that are called geophytes. So I would class this as a geophytic type of cactus, which acts like a bulb. You see the flowers coming out of the gravel. So really, really amazing when these little tiny cacti flower. So cryptic, you just cannot see them unless they're in bloom, a lot of them. So really special to see these in flower along the Atacama coast. This is a new species. I actually described this one. This is Iriaceae tuberculosa. Described it in the Cactus and Succulent Journal earlier this year. Iriaceae crispa, beautiful flowers. And also lots of other unusual and exotic flora. These red flowers. This is actually Bomaria. This is in the, it's related to Alströmerias. It's actually a lily. And most of the diversity is up in Bolivia, Peru, even in Ecuador has got a lot, Colombia, Venezuela. So it's much more tropical, you know, but it's just unusual to see this kind of relict species growing on the along the Atacama Desert in amongst Copiapoas. It's like crazy to see this lily there. There's also a lot of Alströmerias that do this too, but being in the genus Bomaria is quite unusual in the Atacama. Aristolochia. This is actually what I call like a pseudo carnivorous plant. So you can see the inflorescence here. When you cut the flowers open, they do actually have insects trapped inside. So maybe it doesn't directly absorb the nutrients from the insects, but when this flower dries and dies, it falls down right at the base of the plant. So it's bringing more nitrogen and nutrients to, you know, the root system of the plant eventually. But yeah, really bizarre. endemic to the Atacama fog desert too. Chile's full of all kinds of amazing puyas. This is further south, actually, a bit closer to Santiago, much more humid. Beautiful Alstroemeria, Pellegrina here. This puya's just got amazing flower contrast. This is more of a Mediterranean climate, closer to Santiago. This is kind of jumping back up into the Atacama. This is Zephyr elegans, beautiful color on the flowers here when it blooms. Rare to see this in flower. Does not flower every year. Well, this is the Argallia radiata I mentioned before, Bignoniaceae. Also another kind of weird plant family to see in the desert. They can form big fields. They've got a big rhizome underground, so big, thick kind of taproot. Beautiful variations in the color between populations, the flower color. Field of them in amongst the Copiopoa columna alba. Okay, now we're jumping into Argentina. So we're nearing the end of the talk. I hope you can let me finish it. This is not a very big section. Argentina, I mean, all South America has got great culture in the Andes, all the way through, beautiful colors in the buildings and in the clothing and everything. So this is a typical market that you see in one of the plazas. Andean potatoes, the potato is South American, and there's a huge diversity. Well, these are potatoes, yeah, but this tube is actually oxalis. There's a bit of a mix of potatoes and oxalis here, so Solanaceae, oxalis family. So yeah, I love buying these and eating these Andean potatoes full of anthocyanins, really great for the health. The Andes are spectacular in northern Argentina, uncomparable to anywhere else almost. A bit like Sedona, looks a bit like Arizona, doesn't it? Amazing. Up high in the Andes, Serencia. This is in the genus Serencia now. Yes, used to be an Echinopsis, but Serencia. This is a really hardy cactus. Would grow just about anywhere. Beautiful flowers, really, really striking color to them. Just look at that. Also looks great when it's not in flower, like just a regular barrel cactus in your garden. Oh, more Trichocereus. Some of them have really spectacular pink flowers. This is Trichocereus. Oh, can't remember the species. It's from around Tarica. Anyway, I can give you the name of it later. Beautiful flowers, really, really striking. And big fields of Oriacereus. This is Oriacereus salsianus with the white trichomes. So also great to use in landscape gardening as well. And that brings me to the end of the talk. Thank you for sticking around through this. Please hang around to ask me any questions. I'll be looking at the questions in the comments. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Wow. So, I mean, you promised us some amazing pictures and you definitely delivered. So thank you so much. If anybody wants to ask a question, you can put it in the Q&A section or in the chat section. We're getting a lot of comments about people really loving your presentation. I mean, the wildflowers are something special. You're teasing us, I think, because that must have been a really special year with those. I don't even remember what the blue ones were.
The Zephyr elegans. Yeah, actually, it's only something that I've seen twice in 8 years here in Chile. So it's definitely a rare type of event. I mean, I could have done an entire presentation just on that. I have one just on that.
Well, actually, I had a question about how you got interested in working, specializing in cacti and succulents. Or are you just giving a presentation on these plants and you're kind of a generalist? What's your story on that?
Well, my gateway into the botanical world was cacti and succulents from a really young age. I was interested in them, but then, and that was really my only interest. I mean, I was interested in some other exotic kinds of plants too, but when I decided to move over to South America was when I really got into it. And I was just I mean, you can't help but ignore all of the other amazing stuff along the way. And you also get into geology and you just work out how everything is interconnected. And, it's just like, it's a never ending learning curve, So yeah, I'm pretty much interested in just about anything that's over here now in the environment, but still heavily focused on cactus.
It looks like you get to go on these walks with you're going with botanists who are in search of certain species, or you just
Yes,
grab a field guide and go to a certain area and see what you find, or
a whole mix of stuff. I mean, I go to a lot of places by myself. I did Colombia and Venezuela by myself, but I've done Bolivia, Argentina, Chile with other people, Mexico with other people. Social media is a great tool. I mean, a lot of people just write to me like, hey, Stefan, a lot of Latin American people like, you're coming to Mexico, come to my state. They meet up with me, they show me stuff. There's
right.
nothing like going around with a local person. So
Well, now we're getting a couple questions. Stephen wants to know what the best time of year to visit, especially Argentina and Chile.
October and November is the best time. So Chile can be sometimes a bit earlier too. With Chile, it's really dependent on the rainfall. So it can be anywhere from sort of even August to November, but Argentina is reliably like end of October, November, always a really good flowering season there. But in South America in general, that's the best time for pretty much all of South America. I would say October, November, even into summertime, depending on the country. Bolivia is really great in summer from like December to January. So it depends a little bit on the country, but
And
yeah.
probably what you're targeting. I mean, some of those the cactus columnar cactus forests that you were showing from up further north and in Central America, those are just amazing. Probably any time of year.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're always, the flowers are maybe not even the biggest attraction, but with the
Right.
smaller species, some of them you can't even really find or very difficult to find without flowers. So you want to try and be there in the flowering time.
Okay. We have another question. Maybe Tamara asks, maybe in the middle of the South American section, you showed photos with dried grasses. Are those grasses native, and what is the wildflower risk? That's a question that comes up more and more frequently here in California.
Yeah, that is a good question. So for example, when I was showing Azorella compacta, that big green cushion plant, there was pictures of Java Ichu, which is the Ichu grass. So Java Ichu is actually a botanical name, but the locals just call it Ichu grass. That is so widespread. It's native, very hardy grass. And in terms of wildfires, it's really not a thing that you hear about down here in the southern part of the Andes. It is becoming more frequent in Colombia now, where I was showing those Espalacia forests, those big tall tree like Asteraceae. They had big problems with wildfires there this year, last year, the year before. It's becoming a huge problem. Yeah, so I don't know, there's just a lot more vegetation there. Even in the Andes here, like the vegetation in that grassland is pretty sparse. So it doesn't tend to be an issue, wildfires. In the Atacama here, I mean, it's not an issue at all. There are some introduced grasses, sort of really weedy stuff, and even some weedy succulents, but wildfire doesn't tend to be a huge issue, at least what I've seen down here. But in Colombia, Venezuela, it's a pretty big issue, and in Peru as well.
Well, certainly in California, a lot of it is there's a lot of introduced grasses that dry out and become fire starters in the dry
Well,
season.
what is a big problem here, which I just forgot about, is eucalyptus trees from Australia. They're just all over the place, and they have become a big issue in central southern Chile with wildfires and bushfires. And I remember when I was in Bolivia and Peru, I was just blown away how many eucalyptus trees I saw. They're just naturalized. So, I mean, they're just, a fire hazard waiting to happen, and all over the place here in South America.
All right, we have a question from Alicia. She lives in Argentina and she's planning to visit the north this spring to draw and photograph the spring flowers. Do you have any suggestions where I should visit? I'm thinking Salta y Jujuy, but that is a large
Yeah,
region. So
yeah.
that's pretty specific question, and if you can answer quickly, or if want to encourage Alicia to contact you outside of the talk,
Yeah,
you.
send me a message either on Instagram or Facebook, or send me an email as well. Happy to answer any general questions like that if you're visiting habitat. But around Salta, there's a great place called Los Cardones National Park. Amazing. Really good actually in January in summer, because they get summer rainfall there. And you have beautiful desert displays of bulbs and everything too at that time of year. So I've been there. Oh, actually, I've been there 5 times and it's amazing. Yep. Not far from where I live here in Chile, actually.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you're doing a lot of your exploration work on private property or in public parks, or a mixture of both.
Well, it's a mix. It's a big mix, and getting local support for that, or building kind of rapport with local communities and people is really important in the type of work that I do. That's why speaking Spanish is so important. But it's a real mix. But I try and go to as many wild places as I can. But a lot of really point endemic species now are unfortunately kind of being scooped up by private land. So there's not an option sometimes. That happens a lot in Mexico. Mexico is the most difficult place to get around and see highly endemic species, because they usually like highly specialized soils, which are often exploited by either mining practices or just even just the gem and mineral trade and things like that. So people are kind of privatizing a lot of that land, or it's mining land. So yeah, that can be really challenging.
Couple questions. Now that you've shown us all these wonderful plants, George asked, anybody knows whether the yellow flowers in the Bignoniaceae in the Atacama Desert are in cultivation in SoCal? Looks like a winner. Do you know if there's any people cultivating that plant? I don't remember what the species was on it. Sorry.
It's Argallia radiata, and it's really widespread in the Atacama, and it also goes all the way down to Santiago, so it can tolerate that climate, which is more Mediterranean and cold winters. But I haven't seen it in cultivation, but it should be. I mean, I don't think it'd be difficult. But yeah, amazing. A lot of different variety in the flower colors too. But yeah, it's an amazing plant.
And then Carol asked if there are any nurseries propagating the Espalacia species. Those,
Yeah,
those
but
asters.
it's tricky. I know that there's a big nursery in Holland that grows them, and they grow them with the carnivorous plants, because I mentioned they were growing in like moorland habitat. So when you go walking through there, there's kind of like mosses, like Selaginella, and it's really spongy, it's kind of like impregnated with water, it's just, and they like to kind of be in that cool, wet, damp, like a carnivorous plant sort of thing as well, like a lot of carnivorous plants at least. So they grow them with the carnivorous plants in their greenhouses. So that's the kind of environment they like. They don't like to fully dry out, but I haven't seen them in cultivation much. I collected some seed when I was there. I got it to germinate here in Chile, but I just couldn't keep them alive. They died on me. But people probably, it gets cold at nighttime there. I mean, they might even like a refrigerator overnight and then be put out in the dark. I don't know how people would grow them, but I think I know that they're tricky, but they're really cool.
Well, it's always hard to, cultivate. You've got all these wonderful specimens I've never seen before. I'm not in the trade, so it may be something that people would have to look for, like at botanical gardens. Once they have them in their collection, if they have the ability to propagate them, you may be able to find them at sales or big collector locations. But kind of in hand with that, Brenda asks, with all the magnificent specimens there, how prevalent is poaching?
Yeah, it's a big problem. It's especially notable in Mexico. That's the place where I've seen the most of it. Yeah, in cactus habitats, but even carnivorous plants. I mean, succulents in general. Yeah, I don't know. That's a complex question and topic. It's a big issue as well in Brazil, in Chile too, especially with copiopoas. But yeah, it's a problem, and it's hard to manage. I think agricultural departments are trying to police it a lot more, trying to enforce society's regulations and things like that. But it still happens, you know, people get around it. There's a lot of corruption.
Well, even in California, we have poaching issues, certainly with a lot of our deadliest species. It's you
Yeah.
know, you have these wonderful plants out there in the wild, and you want to show them to people, but then as soon as people get interested in them, they start adding a monetary value, and then they become, you know, subject to poaching if they're, you know, if they can. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody said you mentioned, Sandy says you mentioned the conservation nursery growing the Echeveria lau. Are there many nurseries like that?
They're getting more common, especially in Mexico. I've been to several really big ones around Mexico City that have an amazing diversity. And they do a lot of cultivars too. They try and sort of tap into what the Asian market likes with, you know, exotic, you know, colors in the cacti and things like that. But they're getting into it in a pretty big way in Mexico. Yeah, in a lot of different states, I've seen it, and also agaves as well, growing a lot of agaves and cultivars. So that's good to see. And they're generally really cheap, especially when they're coming from Mexico. I've seen it in Chile as well. They're growing a lot of copiopoas now from seed too. Even in the north here, it used to be something you could only get around Santiago, but now more and more people are getting into it. They realize that there's, you know, it's worthwhile getting into, which is good to see, because I think historically there wasn't much of a culture like that around plants, especially in Latin America. It was more of a Western kind of world, hobby and thing, but now they're really starting to get into it down here, which is good to see. And they're selling them at really reasonable prices, much cheaper than you would find in like Europe or the US too. So, you know, they're competitive. So it's good to see, and I think more and more people are going to get into it. So
But they're basically propagating their own native species and then starting their own, you know, planting them in their own yards. That's really wonderful to hear.
yeah,
Great.
yes, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, somebody
good for
says that's
pollinators.
fantastic news.
Yeah.
uh, one more question. You mentioned the cactus resin tea as a tea. Have you ever encountered any other interesting edibles
Oh, that was the
besides
Uretta.
peyote?
That was no, yeah. Um, Well, in the Andes in general, there's a lot of really interesting things that you find for sale in the markets, you know, like a lot of tuberous oxalis species, you know, a lot of different solanums, a lot of different potatoes. I mean, I've seen hundreds of different types of potatoes, you know, different types of corn, you know, purple corn they use for making like the chicha morada and stuff like that. And just all sorts of different tomatoes too, really, really weird and interesting tomatoes that you've never, you know, they're also South American. Strawberries and things like that too. They're also South American. So, well, the common cultivar strawberries are, you know, cross from a US one and Patagonian one. But anyway, yeah, you see all kinds of different crazy stuff in the markets here, which I love going to. But yeah, that Uretta, you can still find it at the markets, even though it's protected and sort of illegal to sell. Um, but yeah, that's in the Apiaceae family. It's not a cactus, but it does have like a succulent type leaf. Um, and the resins really smells amazing. And when you make a tea out of it, it's super strong. I've had it quite a lot of times actually, and it does help, you know, your immune system, and does have a lot of benefits.
Interesting.
There's a study out on it. If anyone's interested, I'll send it through to you. But I looked at it in treating all kinds of different immune diseases, yeah, even cancer.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of plants out there that haven't really been, you know, people have been using for millennia,
Yeah.
but Western or European science hasn't figured that out yet. So who
When
knows?
you go to like a Bolivian market, I mean, you've got like 15 or 20 different types of quinoa, you know, and you've got like, I don't know, maybe 20 different types of corn. Like, you know, it's just amazing the diversity of like the, well, you know, the types of potatoes that are there. It's mind blowing, you know, what you can find. So,
Another reason to protect those places and those plants. Yep.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think, and now you have to give a talk on edible Solanaceae, but
Oh
maybe not
gosh, yeah,
tonight.
it's not my specialty, but I, I mean, I really get into the markets here, and Peru and Bolivia are amazing. Chile's got a lot of great stuff where I live here at the moment, but Bolivia is where it's at, and Peru, I mean, they're their ancient agricultural practices and crops, they're still doing that stuff today, and hybridizing and playing around with it. And it's just unbelievable what you can find there. And I'm sure you can't see that anywhere else in the world. So it's special.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful talk and all the amazing photos. Please check out Stefan on his Instagram at the Cactus Explorer and his tour group. Please look up the Southern California Horticulture Society. We'd be happy to show you some of our cactus.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, I've been to
Great.
California several times. I hope to come again in the next couple of years. So I'll be
Terrific.
sure to reach out.
All right. Well, thank you again. Good evening. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again at the next one.
Thanks. Good night. Bye.
All right. Good night.